So after a good night of sleep, we wake up and read the funny news that Donald Trump has fired the Chief of Staff of the US Army, the General Brown. And then this is interesting because it's potentially the sign that the US Army will not deploy abroad anymore because because the new Chief of Staff, and maybe more, is not accustomed to traveling with the army, so he prefers to keep the aircraft carriers and the corvettes and so on within the US waters, in case, after all, it's for defense, so to keep it close to the homeland makes it for better security. So, and it's interesting coming from someone who thinks he could have made a deal before the war. If he had been Zelensky, he would have done this, so we know what he would do. It's interesting for the rest of the other allies to be able to determine from an input what is the solution Donald Trump finds, from many inputs and what he finds, and as much as one can have interest into an input to recognize what does what. So if in case you have an army to defend yourself, you have to consider you could have an opponent. If you describe all your action towards, or as a reaction towards an action that was initiated before, it makes easy for the opponent to read, as in an open book, the absence of strategy or the relative panic or the disorganization, which are all elements of losing, contrary to regrouping, regrouping, concentrating, and apply. Oh, readiness is not at this rate yet that application could be okay. So that's a new news from this single. So, of course, if we would be to respect, because yesterday Elon Musk announced, or the president announced that, or Doge announced that all programs linked to diversity, etc., inclusion, or in the name of this, the programs linked to disability as well was cancelled. So this is a new cohort of homeless people soon. Those who have lost their teeth in the psychiatric hospitals will be homeless, and as well as those who are in a wheelchair and so on. The veterans of the army will benefit from this cut largely. The disabled military will be certainly happy to know that their pension is absolutely not certain to be next year. Yes, and so this is for the interior of the USA, but this news is also interesting for the Russians, who can now devise of anything they want, as they understand there is no one at the head of the army for a few days, for an undetermined amount of time, and the only restoration of this capacity would be projection of the force outside, so application, and readiness is not there, so there is no application. So of course, some random bombings here and there could make illusion that the great US Army is ready to take responsibility. And so it's what it gives in terms of military concept. It's the area of responsibility is being de-zoned. The zone that was concerned by the area of responsibility is now an empty place, devoided. So as we know, when there is a void somewhere, matter comes to fill it immediately. So you will see private sector of defense and security find good money to buy later, now that the army is not set in the configuration to defend the US interests anymore, when this interest is not ready at the site of the window of Mar-a-Lago. So don't attack Mar-a-Lago, because it will be defended. But about the rest is now in regrouping mode, or no, it's inventory mode. Who's responsible for what? Who's doing what? What are the diverse plans and operation actions in place? And they could be all removed. It's not in the interest of Mar-a-Lago land that anything persists of the projection of the US Army. After all, if the disengagement is complete, must be a budget cut as well, that all these operations that were useless, apparently. So in such an army, there is no room, contrary to other armies, there is no room for special detachment to be at the command. For instance, the SEALs in the US Army are not commanding, they're executing orders, whereas in some other countries, the highest levels of some other branches of security and defense have power over the army, because of course if the intelligence cannot be at the service of army, it must at least be that the army be at the service of defense, and if intelligence isn't doing defense, what it's for. And so this could be another cut in the budget, what it's for, the giant interception system of the USA, if it's not for defense. So if it's not for defense, it's for control, and then could look as well into the programs of, if there are any programs to control the population by many means, and so these could be cut as well, if people must set free from the state. So the disappearance of the federal state makes 50 states, individual federation of 50 states. So it's not the United States anymore, it's the Federated States of America, the Federate States of America, the FSA, it's funny, the acronyms are funny, like a spanking in French. FSA, from USA you have become the FSA, okay, the Federation of the States of America, headless, running like a goose, headless until now, and over the crest, far out in the void and realizing not. So hopefully we hold them by the hand, the US Army and all this Barnum, for real. And we're gonna bring them back onto the path on the crest, because it's still a long way to fare. It's only been, how many, 8 weeks? Out of several hundred, so over 1,000 days to come, and it's only be 60 days, the ravage, the destruction of the superpower of the USA. And it's like the fantastic Osprey, this plane which can also land as a helicopter with pivoting engines. And the problem with, it's a very good idea, problem is when you're in the helicopter mode, you have to reach a certain speed so that the pivoting of the engine could make it a plane. And in this configuration, you have to assume you're taking enough speed and importance on the air so that the moment technically where the aircraft should be stalling, and because of the orientation of the engine is a dangerous moment, and this plane is regularly involved in crashes because it's complicated to fly. And then this is the configuration where the F-35 and the latest version of the F-35 has now a button which is deemed Coca-Cola on the cockpit, and when you push this button there is a tiny parachute, and the plane continues to fly magically home with a tiny parachute, and it becomes a green plane. That's all it does. Interesting. So it's very complicated to intercept because it's so, when it's in this mode, so slow that you have something like an object. Which is just to humorize. How could we take it seriously otherwise? So it's very grave time. The simple fact to tell Putin the truth about the reality of the right that we represent, and we will judge him, even if it's in absentia. The best that could happen to him is he would disappear so that the judgment could be suspended by history. History will judge and characterize Vladimir Putin as the loser of the war of the human civilization, which extinguished, by the way, of decades of the war to come. So the war is a long time, it's in a century. So we have plenty of time to tap on each belly since then, and it's not gonna work for some. So now the problematic is it's configured to be the defeat of the Western world, and we showed already that Europe was able to ramp up to the production it needs. It's a good shake-up. And the USA, when you go into to see in Fort Knox if the gold is here or not, there will be a lot of military personnel around, and it's okay with them. Look, they have their costume, and their weapons aren't factice, so why bother with the army? When Donald Trump goes and reviews the army, he sees, a great army, and you look, there are plenty and great, so it's a great army and there's nothing to do. This army is perfectly trained and waits for only nothing, because the time of peace of Trump, the peace of Trump, consists in remaining in the view that this army he reviews, which pimps up for him as any army before the review, shows enough so that the reassurance is perfect at a time where the warfare is on the genomic research, on the possibility to poison or to maim or disable masses. The research of the Russian army, as Vladimir Putin explained yesterday. Now it's about if the brasses are shining enough. So they do, certainly. And do we take the others to, come on, you cannot fire everyone? Or do you take the others in a kind of thinking they will resist, and there will be a resistance in the army so that special operations could continue? No, it's too dangerous to work outside of the frame of the orders, because you risk your career for nothing. And so there will be report on report that it's not going well, but the readiness will be on the face of the president each time he speaks of it, and he will have a flick in the eye at this moment to remember there was one moment where indeed the Osprey looked like falling, and we hope there is a good pilot in the US Army now. And so the last word of the Doge was absolutely a great joke. The motive to suppress the programs linked to the disability compensation was accompanied by a great slogan, putting you in control, with suspicion points, I believe. So it's even better. The job is to devise as one soldier becomes the element of the entire army, that he'll be able to see, report, suggest and act without, and it must be a formation of the army to the interdisciplinarity itself, so they can understand interoperability, interdisciplinary, so that he can understand he is more than the function he has. He is one of the items that represents what defense must defend, and under this, that every soldier in the USA decide to become the special operation of his own job, all the time, always, the excellence, perfect, the best, and you get an army of perfect civilians first, because when you learn to behave good, you're good in your civil life too, and then you project a power that is not even in the mind of the best strategist in Russia or anywhere else in the world. So, how could you do this? If I were the chief of staff, I would finance some seminaries and lectures to the troops to motivate them to become their own defense of what they are themselves, starting with an explanation of the necessity and the reality of the habeas corpus, that their body is the place to defend, when on the battlefield the defense of the others is the certainty. The quantum theory explains that you have a good chance when you should be dead that you're not. So there are branching worlds like this, and this to be tested by some pilots maybe, and this to devise a dispositif to communicate between worlds has been proven very difficult in recent scientific series article. And the theory leaves us in disbelief because, of course, it's not what we see. When someone dies, it's not magically reviving somewhere else. And this is the anthropic view to survival, is maybe that the protection of the others makes certain that when it's your turn in their universe, it's not yours in theirs, but someone else's. The principle is simple. It's been explained with the guide of the roulette game from the 1950s in physics, to explain it is one of the interpretation paradox of or tool to explain the paradox of the quantum theory. And in an anthropic quantum world, you should see something like that. So, consequences. Is there an afterworld? Technically, no one knows, and no. When the functions of the body disappear, you have an arrangement with God, you play many prayers and etc., and we'll see. Techniques for the afterlives are not developed because no one came back to testify, as much as from other branching universes. So, the problem is in disbelief. We disbelieve this theory, which makes us weaker when you're on the spot to foreign action. If you think to disbelieve that what you have thought of this assures you of 100% of certainty that you're doing the right thing, if you cannot get this into each and every soldier, you don't get the unity an army requires. So this is why you send it home when there is dissension, divergence of point of view in the army, which certainly must have appeared. The army dissolves. So this is a dissolving army of the disrupted state of the FSA. So as much as the goal of FSA would be the right appropriation of this technique to change names to make reality something else, what else? It is one news. We open the first news, the General Brown, and you can say what you want. You will see that what we. So next news was the Pentagon reduced 5% of its civil workers. So that's great, because 5% is about the proportion. There is 5 to 10% of people, disabled people in the world, so you can bet these, your perfect co-worker at the Pentagon in a wheelchair will be late soon. Why lay valid people? You must lay those who are invalid. Of course, if you want to optimize, they're susceptible to have defects, and you don't want this, you want perfection in your system, so fire them. And so this is where we are happy not to have ever have anything to do with the official US of anything. So there is an understanding beyond concern regarding everything, precisely, but this. And so as we face the adversary eye to eye, or at least we put our talking mouth close to his listening ear to tell him the wrong. On the other hand, the calinotherapy of Vladimir Putin continues, and Donald Trump is playing absolute submission, like dogs do. Dogs do. They fall on their back and show you everything of their inside, belly, and so on. So it's a nice posture to signal to a human or to another dog that there is no aggressivity here, and that if the other dog wants to impose its superiority by violent means, he can. This is the posture of this morning Donald Trump reducing with Elon Musk the great budget of everything that made weird policies of the USA, the former USA, now FSA, to make what needed to be done. So it's good to see that the principle of, for instance, secret operations, for instance, infiltration, for instance, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, all the work that was on the ground linked to this, was it an ambiguity? No, linked to this sweet letting be. Let it be, let be, that was the message before. And is cancelled, all this is cancelled, so we are happy to read the insurance rate of the day that comes every time we are fired. So it's interesting to be fired in the morning, because you can do something else in the afternoon, like explaining why this massive disorganization of no concern to us, but that we know about, although we know nothing about anything, as always. And you will believe that some other brasses will organize the continuation, when in fact you will find many possibilities will disappear from what the AI responds as to the question, who is the most beautiful, asked by the President Donald Trump every morning as a rage to revenge again. So did the army or the Pentagon did wrong to Donald Trump? Yes. They convinced him that he had justice, dismissed the case, but convinced Donald Trump he was in possession of classified documentation he should never have kept towards him. And now, for so much he has suffered from the defense of the USA, into which the Pentagon is one of the elements. It's a small building, I know, in a countryside, where what do? Yes, they write the checks for the pays at the Pentagon. So, leaving 95% of the workers at the Pentagon, laying the ones that were causing trouble, and especially trouble around the Kremlin and Russia, because that's enough is enough, will now be, will they have an insurance anymore? They will have an insurance for, no need. They were knowing that they knew what they were doing, So interestingly, of course, none of this is to happen. None of this is to happen. Look. So this is how, by simple copy of the negative of what the FSA do now, is it possible to reconstruct the plan that was on before. And we won't do this because it represents interest in strategy that we're not ready to give to anyone. We don't betray what's the most important, of course, contrary to someone else. Less projection, less risk. That's for a sure thing. And then if you have a constraint home to things you don't want to do, you could still write a letter to Vladimir Putin so that it ceases, it's easy, on the Kremlin's website, now that the White House has ceased to respond to any of what becomes the game of the laugh of the century. So it's good in the morning to have a good laugh, and as we shared many views with the former Secretary of Defense, we know that the day if ever we organize a dinner to finally meet, it would be on the basis of this laugh of the century forever, and the anecdotes and the funny bits would be to recount every time it has had to do with disanger of the president, of the new president, that in the past would have been catastrophes that we know because we participate into cancelling them. It's good to wake up with a good cheer.